Hello everyone. I welcome you all in this lecture on fundamental rights mentioned in part 3 of Indian Constitution. As I told you in my previous discussion with you that we are going to start a lecture series on fundamental rights, and in my first lecture, along with the little history of fundamental rights, right from Magna Carta to its inception in Indian Constitution, we also discussed two very crucial articles on right to equality, that is Article 14 and Article 15. This lecture is entirely devoted on Article 16. I would like to mention here before we proceed further that Article 14 and 15 and 16, they are a cohesive unit. They are interlinked with each other. So this lecture, I will tell you the basic provisions and exceptions and the Supreme Court cases which emerged in the implementation of Article 16. So for your convenience, students, I have bifurcated this act into two sections. Section 1 deals with the provisions of the article, in which we include Article 16 Provision 1 and Article 16 Provision 2. Article 16 Provision 1 clearly mentions that there shall be equality of opportunity in public appointments under all state governments. Article 16.2 mentions that there shall be no discrimination only on the ground of caste, religion, sex, race, place of birth, residence, and descent. So these are the two provisions, but these provisions have certain limitations. Number one, this article is dealing with only citizens of India. It is not applicable on foreigners. Secondly, the provisions of the Article 16(1) are applicable only in government services. Hence, it has limitations that it is not applicable in private concerns. Secondly, it is also not applicable on contractual services. Thirdly, state governments or central governments are at liberty to make differentiation on the basis of academic qualification, performance in the test, and physical fitness. Okay, so these are the provisions of the article. It has certain exceptions also, which are clearly mentioned in 16 provision 3, 16 provision 4, 16 provision 5, 16 provision 6. Now let us deal them one by one. 16.3 clearly mentions that the parliament, here the word parliament is used, not governments. You should keep this thing in mind. The parliament is at liberty to make certain exceptions on the basis of residence. And this has happened in our setup, that certain state governments have made special provisions for appointment for their residency, for their citizens. For example, the northeastern states, Meghalaya, Nagaland, Tripura, they have certain special provisions for employment for their own citizens. At present, Andhra Pradesh has this type of provisions for their citizens, and after bifurcation of Telangana in 214, this provision is also available in Telangana also. 16.4, this is the most crucial and important provision, because it has amounted lots of Supreme Court cases and political exploitation to some extent also. 16.4 clearly mentions that state can make special provision for certain class of people like SCs, STs and OBCs. Whereas 16.5 makes provision in favor of some religious organizations. For example, a Hindu religious organization has a freedom to appoint Hindu as its head and other members. Similarly, the Muslim organizations such as Waqf boards, they have the liberty to appoint people from their own community and from their religion. Article 16.6 has been recently added, and it gives reservation to economically weaker sections of the society. This has been added in 2019. Now, the interesting turn here is that Article 16.4 has amounted lots of controversy regarding reservation in India in favor of backward castes and backward classes. So, the important thing which I want to mention here is have a break from this, and if we go into the background of this, then Constitution nowhere mentions about any commission regarding who will decide which castes are the backward castes. So the first backward caste commission was appointed in 1953. This commission was headed by Kalelkar. It was appointed in 1953. The commission gave its report in 1955. Astonishing facts were highlighted in this commission, in this report of the commission. The commission pointed out that there are total 2399 backward classes in India. Which amounts 70% of the population. Hence, it recommended 70% reservation. This commission, even Supreme Court के भी इससे कान खड़े हो गए, and Supreme Court gave a verdict in 1963 that a reservation cannot be exceeded more than 50%. Now, the second backward class commission, जिसने बहुत हिंदुस्तान की राजनीति में बड़ा फेरबदल किया और lots of movements and agitations को जन्म दिया इस कमीशन ने. Second backward class commission was appointed in 1979, and this commission is popularly known as Mandal Commission because it was headed by Mr. Mandal, parliamentarian from Bihar. The commission was appointed in 1979 and it gave its recommendations or submitted its report in 1980. 10 years the commission kept lying without any implementation. No action was taken on this. A sudden move in Indian politics happens in 1990. A new government headed by VP Singh came into power, and VP Singh decided to implement Mandal Commission. There are maybe so many political reasons behind this, but VP Singh implemented Mandal Commission report in 1990. Okay, through a Office of Memorandum issued on August 13, 1990. This amounted lots of resistance in Indian society. Lots of movements, both from the OBC communities and the higher caste communities. Subsequently, the government could not sustain and fell down. And along with this, lots of courts cases came into existence to oppose this Mandal Commission recommendations. So, after VP Singh's government Congress government came into power again, and under the leadership of P.V. Narasimha Rao, the new government, the new Congress government again issued a memorandum, office memorandum on September 25th, 1991. It recommended two very interesting things. This commission recommended two very important things. Number one, there must be a creamy layer among the OBCs. Those who are already affluent, this means that those who are already affluent or not backward on the basis of land or other assets, they should be excluded from the category of reservation. And the second very controversial issue which was issued in this memorandum was that 10% reservation should be there for those people who are in not in OBC but in advanced communities, but economically poor. So economically poor communities के लिए इस ऑफिस मेमोरेंडम में 10% सीट्स का रिजर्वेशन का प्रावधान किया गया. This amounted a case in a Supreme Court, which is popularly known as Indira Sahni versus Union of India case. Let me tell you briefly that before this Indira Sahni case, Bar Council of Supreme Court went into court against the office memorandum of the VP Singh's government, and Supreme Court in its verdict stayed the operation of the commission report. In Indira Sahni case, a very landmark judgment was passed in 1992 by Supreme Court of India. Instead of going into the greater details, I would like to brief the very crucial things, 3, 4, 5 things which are very crucial in this regard. Number one, Supreme Court mentioned that there should be no reservation in promotion. Number one recommendation. Okay. Second recommendation, which is very important, is that reservation in no way can exceed more than 50%. Third is, in carry forward cases, even in carry forward cases, reservation cannot exceed 50%. Let me briefly mention that what is this carry forward. Suppose in 1 year the total seats of the SCs and OBCs were not filled. Some seats remained vacant. So those seats will be transferred to the next session or next year. So the total of the previous and the current year should not exceed more than 50%. Okay, this is carry forward. The vacant seats are carried forward for the next appointments. Third is 10% for economically weaker section. Formula of Narasimha Rao government was totally rejected. Okay, so these were the few recommendations which Supreme Court verdict highlighted. This was in fact the whole case of Indira Sahni case. Now, to counter these things, Government of India came out with certain amendments in the constitution. The first amendment came 1995. It was 77th amendment in the constitution, which added a new clause in 16.4. And this clause was 16.4a. What this new clause added? This clause added against the verdict of the Supreme Court which prohibits reservation in promotion. This clause clearly added 16 clause 4a was added. A clearly mentions that there should be reservation in promotion also. This was, keep this thing in mind for competitive examination. This was 77th Amendment Act carried out in 1995. The second important amendment in this regard was 81st Amendment, which happened in 2000. This 81st amendment clearly added another clause in 16.4, that is 16 clause 4b. So what this added is that reservation in carry forward cases, if government is satisfied that certain sections are not adequately represented, so reservation can exceed more than 50% also. The 50% bar in creamy layer was lifted from this amendment. Okay. Then came 85th amendment 2001. This gave a very crucial benefit for the SCs and SC communities. It mentioned that not only reservation in promotion, but consequential benefits in seniority will also be given. Okay. So after this, one more amendment carried out in 1909, that is 103, third article, which has given 10% reservation to economically weaker sections in forward communities. So this is all about the provisions of the article, its exceptions, the Supreme Court cases, and the amendments carried out by the government. This is all about Article 16. Now let us move to next article in this series, that is Article 17. Article 17 deals with untouchability. Our constitution makers, as we know that the society, there were so many social evils prevailing in our society before independence, and even after that, so special provisions were carried out to abolish those evils, and one of them was untouchability. Even the founding father of our constitution, Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, faced this during his lifetime during schools. I have read somewhere that the school in which he was reading in Bombay had a separate provision, drinking water provision for him, and he had to wait for a person from Swaran caste to offer water to him. So the constitution makers made it a not only banned it, but made it a fundamental right. So untouchability was abolished by Article 17. Untouchability is not defined; it is in single commas mentioned mentioned in the Constitution in single commas. So it was first defined by Mysore High Court, in which it mentioned that untouchability does not mean touching, prohibiting someone for touching. It has social implications. If you are socially disabled because of untouchability, then the case for untouchability amounts. It means clearly social disabilities caused by your birth and caste. This is the meaning of untouchability mentioned by High Court. The next article in this line is Article 18. Article 18 is, as we know, abolition of titles. During British time, several type of titles were given to Indians, like Rai Sahab, Rai Bahadur, Jamidar, and so on and so forth. So such type of articles amounted a clear distinction in our society. It divided the society into sections: rich, poor, middle, workers, rulers. So after independence, our constitution makers made this provision in our constitution as a fundamental right to abolish all such titles. The interesting thing here to note is that titles are abolished not only in government of India, भारत सरकार में ही titles का abolition नहीं है, even Indians cannot take titles from foreign countries also. It is not only the matter of India only, even Indians cannot take titles from foreign countries also. So, but there are certain exceptions to this, which are very important to mention. Certain exceptions are there in defense forces, for example. You have titles like Major, Colonel, Lieutenant Colonel. So these are not covered in the provision of abolition of titles. So this is all about abolition of titles, right to abolition of titles. Now, at the end of this lecture, I would like to give certain queries which you will have to answer paragraph wise. The first query is, what is the constitutional structure, constitutional provision of various commissions? For example, SC, ST Commission and Backward Class Commission. Mention this thing in one paragraph. Second question deals with the correlation. What is the correlation between right to equality of Article 14, 15 and 16? Are they entirely separate from each other or they are correlated with each other? I have answered this thing in my lecture. I have mentioned briefly in my lecture. The third question is, what was the basic points of the verdict given by Supreme Court of India in Indira Sahni case? The fourth question is, mention briefly the recommendation, the amendments made by 77th Amendment Act, 81st Amendment Act and 85th Amendment Act by Government of India. The last question in this regard is, do you think that there should be a reservation for economically weaker sections in India, as we have done 10% reservation by one of the amendments in the Constitution carried forward in 1990. The last question in this series is about Indira Sahni case. You will have to mention when this case was filed in Supreme Court of India and what were the major recommendations or what were the basic ruling given by Supreme Court of India in this regard. Thank you very much for listening me patiently, and I hope that you will answer these queries very intelligently. Thank you very much.